Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, as always, Ben Thomas. You know, our industry is a fun one, and we get to build some incredible installations. But one of the things that fascinates me most about our industry is when we could take things on the road and make them portable. So I want to talk to a couple folks today who live in the world of portable products and expertise. And we'll dive in a little bit more about what some of the opportunities and best practices are on that side of our industry. So I want to bring in a couple folks today: Dan Marcus from RGB Spectrum and Rory McCabe from Dejero. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really appreciate the time.
Well, Dan, I want to start with you. I know that you have been with RGB Spectrum for a while, and you have the opportunity to build some portable systems primarily in mission critical environments. What are some of the common challenges and maybe some of the opportunities that specifically that world has kind of set up from a portability standpoint?
Yeah, well, I think the network is really critical to a proper distributable system. And generally speaking, in our world, there remains some divergence between audiovisual and IT, and responsibilities for connectivity vary in that way. So audiovisual integrators, audiovisual teams, our partners, our channel partners, the folks responsible for installing systems on end user networks often have a certain area of expertise and also a certain area of responsibility. And that area of responsibility stops at connectivity beyond the walls of that facility, sometimes beyond the walls of that room, even going so far as to air gap a system in some certain secure environments where the audiovisual system is on purpose and for security reasons run in a segmented and segregated way, separate from other network functions. So we like to talk about audiovisual as a service layer, but a lot of times it's really not an integrated service layer in the way that voice, video, and data tends to be in a telecommunications architecture. So generally speaking, you have some separation between teams, and that creates some challenges.
Yeah. Well, Rory, I'm curious too, as somebody who lives really on the video side of things, the video transmission side of things. Obviously, Dejero does a ton of work in the broadcast side of the world. How does that cross over with the mission critical side of things, especially when it comes to the need for the portability and reliability from a video standpoint?
Yeah, so it's funny that you talk about that. Yeah, so we were birthed out of video transmission, right? That's Dejero's largest, what was its largest segment of his business, and mission critical communications kind of came in as a let's call it, it's definitely not an afterthought, but is an exposure to the most challenging thing, which is video transmission in real time over wireless or space-based networks. That's a challenge in itself, right? Down is easy, up is hard, but real-time communications, audio and video, or anything from a data perspective, our ability to aggregate multiple different data links and provide a seamless connection via one IP address is where we've started to, let's call it, change how work has been done, right? When a lot of people are used to, well, I drop service here, I don't have coverage there, I can't get the video out here. Those are really big challenges in general, right? But if we think about from when milliseconds matter, they don't have a tolerance, a threshold there. So, Dejero has prided itself on its ability to enable news media for that live engagement there. Think about every time there's a live news feed out from something very, very challenging. And just recently, Boulder, Colorado had a newsworthy event recently regarding an individual actor that caused some substantial chaos and harm to society. It's not just about the people getting their own video stream out for their news stories. It's what is the body cameras or the dash cameras? What is everything that everyone's doing for situational awareness happen to safeguard the population from having a challenging scenario going to a catastrophic scenario. And that's where Dejero comes in. Our ability to get that information out, utilizing technology like Dan's, from a mobility perspective, but having that stable connection. When networks get brought to their knees, how do we help to overcome those challenges?
It's interesting, Rory, you brought up, things like body cams and stuff like that. I think that it's easy for us to, as an industry, think, okay, we've got satellite video feeds and, maybe some security cameras, but there's a lot of different disparate sources now. I would even loop cell phones into that as well. But Dan, I'm curious, how does that all sort of integrate into the larger system, right? I mean, obviously these are disparate sources that live in different places, require different bandwidths and throughputs. How does that all sort of integrate into one, maybe a single pane of glass?
I think the single pane of glass is one of those concepts that has some different meanings to different people. I think from an IT perspective, from a software development perspective, it means being able to create some boundaries wherein you have a safe and secure integrated ecosystem of systems that probably fall under the same software, right? Same database lookups, same network. So you're talking about necessarily, because there are so many valuable software providers, so many valuable systems out there, and so many different networks. You're talking about an area that's a challenge. Certainly, if you look at some of the larger software providers, the answer is simple. Everybody get on our software, right? That's what a large software provider would ultimately want. They want to protect their environment, and they're trying to add value, and that's a very good IT way to add value. Everybody get on the same system. Let's work on back-end integration of those systems. But these are complicated ideas, easier said than done. So that is one way to think of a single pane of glass. Another way to think of a single pane of glass could be visual compositing. So audio-visual, RGB, for example, takes a different approach to a single pane of glass. Our integration is not necessarily as deep as the one I've just described, but it's much more flexible and easy to achieve. In a room environment, it would be very typical, let's say, an emergency operations center, to make it easy through audiovisual tools to ingest systems that are not on the same network, that do not have the same software. So bringing in a plurality of users who are stakeholders or contributors to a common operating picture, who can each provide some layer of value to what we can generally see together, that is something that audiovisual uniquely can do well. The challenge for audiovisual is taking that on the road, and that's really where RGB and Dejero work very closely together to take sort of best of both worlds here, the ability to air gap systems and bring views into a common operating picture, into a single pane of glass locally, as well as being able to ingest those systems and bring them together without necessarily doing that back-end IT integration.
Well, Dan, you're right, and it's interesting too, right? Not only just from a technology standpoint are we now able to execute some of these portable options, but Rory, it's also the level of connectivity that we have, right? Obviously, we've had things like bonded cellular for a while, but really we're starting to see the rise of satellite providers and coverage in 5G. What are some of those connectivity items that now are allowing us to go more portable and distribute these signals at a better bit rate than ever?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen in the last 3 years, from a low Earth orbit connectivity standpoint, absolutely completely changed the game from making space-based connectivity. We've seen the evolution of, let's go with low and mid-band 5G systems for the cellular networks, and the priority connectivity of, your front lines, your T priority, and your first sense of the world, right? Really help to build out better, stronger networks. And that's giving you higher throughput. It's giving you higher reliability. It's done a lot of things. And without that infrastructure, Dejero itself is dependent upon it, right? We have the roads, we need the infrastructure to rely upon. What we've seen with the throughput increase and the capabilities increase is the ability to respond back to more scenarios and more situations. What we've also noted, though, in the last about 10 years or so, is the catastrophic incidences within mission critical communications needs have just ramped up. We've gone from like 5 to 8 incidences a year up to an average of 20. And when that happens, and when those situations go through, solutions like Dan's need to be in place to provide that connectivity back, right? That provide the imagery and audio back. The challenge is the network stool is you're seeing infrastructure being damaged, and when they fortified and built things out, you can't take out when a fire burns out a tower, right? When you have certain areas, like I'm in Montana right now, the shadow of a mountain, right? The horizon drop offs from different constellations. All of these little micro challenges or infrastructure challenges based upon limited infrastructure comes in to make a situation of a hurdle, right? I can't have this be my one leg that kicks out and I fall. So Dejero's practice is taking all of that infrastructure, unifying it into one, so we can say, okay, if someone oversaturates a satellite constellation, that's problematic. Our ability to take in multiple data feeds such as that and create a stable uplink, doing a per packet per flow decision, we're able to utilize even the challenge connections when other traditional systems, well, valuable, cannot capitalize on the connectivities there, where Dejero is able to use what would normally be construed as a non-functioning asset.
Yeah. Well, Rory, I'm glad you sort of broke that down too. There's obviously a number of different challenges from a connectivity standpoint. But Dan, I'm curious, when you get to the field, and we're talking about these mission critical applications, we're talking about long times without power. We're talking about glare. We're talking about redundancy and resilience. I mean, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see these folks facing whenever they're deploying these systems in the field?
I mean, generally speaking, I think that you have some variation between the requirements of the user, simplicity, high availability, redundancy, and the folks who are deploying those systems. I think that the challenges, one of the challenges is that these types of incidents don't happen that frequently. If you're in an emergency operations center and you activate the room, you turn it up, you make it work. Well, that's a relatively sane and simple involvement, sometimes more sane, sometimes more simple. But when you're talking about going out into an ad hoc environment where you have suddenly challenges getting access to network, challenges making systems work, new participants who have vital information that you weren't banking on, the difficulty of simulating these ad hoc environments is much more complicated than simulating an activation in a fixed facility. And so you don't know how things are going to be impacted in terms of availability of your key infrastructure in order to deploy. And so I think that really it's a matter of building processes for testing these systems in complex environments where key elements such as backhaul may fall away. And you need to be able to accommodate some variety of different implementations from a network backhaul perspective. Typically, it's the networking piece that's going to be the most complicated. Wouldn't you say, Roy?
No, I'd agree. Dejero runs off a PACE model, right? So emergency management is really well adapted to this, your primary, alternative, contingency, and emergency. And it's one of those things when you're going out and you're doing exercise or you're having a situation of all that you have to go to, you want to think about everything you have to do to respond to the scenario. The technology shouldn't be something you want to think about. That should be taking that logic of your PACE and folding it into your backhaul and saying, okay, we're here, we're going to do our jobs, we're going to focus on whether it's protecting society, whether it's responding to an event and getting something under control. You need that simplicity that Dan knocked on. We don't want to have to think, well, hey, I've done network surveys. This is where I need to pull in my LEO satellite panels. This is where I need to have maybe I'm more slightly Verizon leading here or First and here or T-Mobile there. It's a matter of just having something in your system that says, I'm going to go wherever I need to go and it will just work and I will be able to adapt to my scenario. And my teams can focus on their day to day as opposed to a tool they're using, right? You want that tool just to work, right? And think about that with anyone in first response. I need that hose. I've checked it in advance. Okay, we're smart people. We always test things. But I grab that hose, I hook it to the hydrant, and it's just going to work. It's not going to break on me. It's not going to have that. Or respectfully, the way we work together with RGB is we already have those secondaries, those tertiaries, right? We already have those connections there. So if that doesn't work, it doesn't matter to me because the way it's built is already orchestrated to support those sorts of scenarios from unfolding. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to first response, one thing is almost guaranteed, and that is chaos, right? We work with chaos, not against it.
Yeah. Rory, I'm curious too. I mean, you brought up a nice point there, and it's sort of the operator and user experience. It's something obviously we talk about a lot in the world of control room design and things like that, but you can't have a system like this that requires tons of in the field troubleshooting, because a lot of times these people that are operating it aren't subject matter experts, right? They know how to use the tool as it's designed to function. How does that go into sort of the product and platform design side of things when it comes to that? And then I'll kick the same question to you next, Dan.
Yeah, so by default, Dejero takes it's our technology skills, SBT, smart blending technology. By default, out of the box, we are aggregating every single data link that we put in place. So it doesn't matter if it's fixed, space, or your terrestrial wireless. Everything folds in and blends, and the pipe intelligently determines where every single packet needs to go to get it there the most effectively and efficiently path. Traditional approaches for a lot of people is I need to have a networking background, right? What is my primary path? What are my thresholds for there? When does that fail over? You're having to go through and say, well, what is my minimum bandwidth requirements? What are the applications I need to limit? What are all these things that I have to do to make this work, as opposed to, hey, out of box, it's going to function this way. If you did need to customize, yeah, we can always happy to do that, right? We don't pretend to be a fixed or a fiber replacement, for example. So we can have like a primary path, but we still have that insurance plan. If something happens here and my thresholds are at risk, the full blend takes over and I don't see packets drop. I don't have a disruption in my connectivity. And that's critical, right? When we're talking about audio and video, loss of packets means loss of information. Loss of information can cause loss of property, loss of life. And no one's here to have that be part of their functional model. And RGB and Dejero are both built off that mentality.
Absolutely. And Dan, I'll let you land the plane with that same question. Why is it so important to focus on that operator experience, not only to make it easy to use, but easy to even maybe troubleshoot?
For sure. The RGB spectrum, many are familiar with RGB. We've been around for about 40 years. We invented the multi-view technology, the ability to aggregate multiple systems onto a common screen. And then over time, that screen has migrated to the desks. That screen has migrated to multiple locations across the facility, that has migrated with network to multiple locations across the city, the county, the state, the world. So the ability to create good connectors between these systems is really, really critical. But the user interface in a traditional AV environment is often highly customized. So you have a lot of custom programming, a lot of third-party control, and a lot of these are designed to make larger systems just work and be simple. Nothing against those kinds of systems. They're very important. But generally, when you get into more critical, more portable systems, you break that kind of mentality. You break that kind of code base and that kind of system. So generally what is required is a more robust system for what audiovisual would refer to as bring your own device. So in a complex room environment, you're going to anticipate a minority of bring your own device typically, and you're going to leverage a control system that controls all of the elements of the room. In an ad hoc environment, you need everything to be self-contained, and you need the bring your own device component, that level of user interface, to be simplified radically so that anybody can understand it. Then you need to make sure that the system utilizing the gateway can access remote systems. You still probably have that connectivity to a room that is gated by control systems, a room that has that software integration in it. But out in the field, you need to be able to access those resources locally without necessarily having access to that more sophisticated integration effort.
Well, gentlemen, look, I can't believe we're already at time. It feels like we have just sort of scratched the surface of the conversation. And I would like to invite you both back on, certainly to dig in deeper, because there's so many different layers to unpack, right? Not only from a connectivity standpoint, but a design standpoint. And okay, what are some different use cases even beyond just the world of mission critical? You've got all sorts of pop-up opportunities and places like healthcare, hospitality, all sorts of different places. But I'll tell you what, I appreciate you both spending a few minutes with us this afternoon, and we'll have you on back soon.
Appreciate it, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Appreciate your time. Take care.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe, and check us out again next time on the show.